Yeah, well, thank you, for coming along and being prepared to listen to me. Um, I'd like to also acknowledge that the land that I'm joining from today is Wurundjeri country, the people of the Kulin Nation here in Victoria, and I would like to acknowledge their spiritual relationship and ongoing connection to the land, sea, and sky, and pay our respects to Indigenous elders, past and present, and acknowledge that these lands are unceded. I also work on Bunurong lands, which is where that photo's from. Uh, so I was going to start just to talk a little bit about where I'm actually based and my wonderful team. I'm based at the Centre for Alcohol Policy Research, and that's at La Trobe University. Dr. Professor Emmanuel Kunch is our director, and I sort of sit as the head of the alcohol related harm team. And we do two of our big projects at the moment. I've got a National Health and Medical Research Council investigator grant, which has given me 5 years of funding and the ability to support this team. And we look at a whole range of different harms that people experience, not so much from their own drinking, but from the harms that they from others drinking. And a key additional project we've got from the Australian Research Council at the moment is a project that's linking data and looking at a cohort of young people in child protection and seeing what kinds of experiences they have across a whole range of different systems that they come into contact with in Victoria and Australia. And I've got a photo here of the team, of some of the team, and everyone has incredible strengths, and I think it probably is a good opportunity to think through how we can collaborate more closely and what we can do together as a as we work in this sector. And yeah, if anyone wants a copy of these slides, I'm happy to hand them out too, and you can sort of look up whose work you would be kind of interested in following up more. And you'll note Cass Hopkins is here today, and we should give her a call out because she's just passed her PhD. So she's got her results back, and she just has to make some minor changes, and then but she's done a lot of really great work on looking at how others drinking can affect children. And many of us have different strengths, and that's just another lovely photo of the wildlife sanctuary that we have at La Trobe University, where a few of us are sort of sitting. And we also have a lot of international connections. And I know that AFINet too does have some great international connections, but I'm the secretary of the Kettle Brewing Society, and that's the Kettle Brewing Society for Social and Epidemiological Research on Alcohol, and we hold annual conferences, and it's a very research focused organisation that looks at alcohol in a broad range of ways from many different perspectives. And so I think, if any of you were interested in collaborating or joining that group, that we would be very welcoming. It's a wonderful society. Anyway, now I'm going to turn to the work that I've been doing over time, and to talk about what we mean when we talk about alcohol's harm to others. It was first clearly acknowledged by the World Health Organization in 2010, although of course, harms to families have been acknowledged since, for millennia really. And for example, in the gin epidemic in London, with Hogarth's sketches that are, so clearly frame some of the harms that people experience from other people's drinking. But anyway, this framing focuses not so much on the person drinking and the harms they experience themselves, but the harms that occur from others drinking. And so in the World Health Organization global strategy to reduce the harmful use of alcohol, they explicitly acknowledged people around the drinker in 2010. And it is a key driver of some of the action that we see on alcohol because of the harm that can occur to others. When we talk about what kinds of harm, we can see that there are a range of health and social harms that people can experience, including aggression and violence and injury. There's also public disorder and amenity harms. There's interpersonal harms, including intimate partner violence and child abuse and neglect. There are social and mental health effects, and there is a range of increased burdens that occur when people look after people who are drinking. And then we can also see harms spilling over into work and work sectors and uh, legal and police services and a whole range of areas in which we sort of, and what we've done in this alcohol's harm to other space is use a whole range of data sets and surveys to try to understand what the scope, what the range and the magnitude of this harm is. We also have taken in 2010, Robin Room, a wonderful mentor of mine, um, uh, dreamed or developed this framework for trying to understand the immediate relationships that we see where alcohol can come into play and affect a range of different roles. So in different settings, you can see how alcohol can have impacts on the person, on people in the family and household, on friends, on co-workers and strangers and others in their social networks. But of course, all this happens within context, and we see where structural problems like poverty, sexism, and racism intersect with these kinds of more immediate relationships and harms, and we see these kinds of harms being accelerated or exacerbated by structural problems and vice versa. So, and some of the work that we've done really has been quite global. So, for example, when we think about how common is alcohol's harm to others, we've done work like this, which shows that if we survey countries in, I think there might be 29 countries there, over 45% of respondents across all of these countries reported that they had 45% of respondents across these countries reported that they had been affected by somebody else's drinking in the last year. So that's a huge burden of harm that people report experiencing because of alcohol, and not their own drinking, but because of other people's drinking. You can see that the range of harms varies quite widely. 20 to near 80% of respondents have reported that they've been harmed in some way by somebody's drinking. And we also note that women overall reported more harm from others drinking than men, and this was particularly the case in some countries, in Denmark, Sweden, Austria, Finland, Iceland, etc. But yet in other countries, lower odds were reported by women in Ireland and Spain and Sri Lanka and Lao PDR. So we get a lot of information about how people are affected and which people are affected and by what relationships and in what different ways. I'm kind of going to jump now to our most recent national report. So at the end, in December 2025, we pulled together all the results of our most recent national survey. We pulled together information from our secondary response agencies and from qualitative interviews that we'd undertaken to get a really good sense of what was the current estimate of alcohol's harm to others in Australia. And in thinking about what kinds of effects people talk about when they experience alcohol's harm or harm from others drinking, we see people experience a range of emotional and physical, psychological effects and effects on their social relationships. And so some of these the feelings and the range of feelings and moods that were engendered by the affected drinker can range from being minor emotional effects, just where people report being or describe being feeling uncomfortable or being annoyed or embarrassed by their family member when they transgress social norms. Moderate effects might include being more upset or stressed or frustrated or disillusioned when people are subjected to the additional ongoing caring responsibilities. When or severe effects include things like being feeling frightened or fearful for their lives due to physical or verbal abuse. So there's a range of different ways that people reported on in the qualitative interviews that we undertook as part of a part of the Alcohol's Harm to Others study, the recent national study. And we had both qualitative interviews and quantitative surveys where we asked people a barrage of questions. And when we asked people what kinds of harms they had been affected by in the closed-ended survey, people did report being emotionally hurt or neglected, having to care for or clean up after people drinking, being threatened, having less expenses. And also being hurt and verbally abused. And as you can see, in almost all of these harms, women reported being more likely to experience these harms than men. Again, we looked at some of the longer term impacts on individuals and their relationships. And as you can see from some of these quotes, people reported having their emotional state being sort of affected long term, that they didn't feel uncomfortable around people who were drinking. It just made them feel nervous because of that history that they brought with them. And then you have sort of really just disturbing incidences that people report, as well as people just reporting no longer being in contact with their family and losing contact with their family because they couldn't they didn't want to have to experience some of the harms they had again, or continue to experience those harms from others that they have experienced it. And so one thing we did was look at whose drinking had most affected adult participants in our study. And we found that when we did this, 71% of respondents reported that a man was the person whose alcohol use had most harmed them. And on average, this person was drinking 5 or more drinks 3 or 4 times a week. And when they drank heavily, were often consuming 13 or more drinks. And so we found, that men were, it was men's drinking that was often problematic. And yet we also see that whilst there are issues around feminisation of alcohol marketing and harms to women from drinking, and from women to harms to women themselves from their own drinking, we question whether there seems to be almost more influence on women's drinking than there is on men's drinking. Yet we know, sort of almost jumping back a little here, that greater proportions of men drink than women across the globe in every country. And for example, this graph shows on the y-axis how much on the y-axis how much men drink, and on the x-axis how much women drink. And you can see, for example, that men drink sort of 3 times as much as men do, as in Australia, and same in Brazil. And I think worldwide the situation is similar. So I think we would argue that that we really need to focus more heavily on men's drinking and think about the gendered impacts of drinking and its impact on children and families. And when we start to look at cross nationally at what the harms have been, we find that uh, from 12 to almost half of women have reported experiencing harm from a known drinker in their lives. Women living with a partner reported this, and you can see so 1 in 5 women reported harm from a partner's drinking, and in Australia and in Thailand, almost half of the women in this survey living with a partner reported that they'd been harmed by their drinking in some way. We also found that women reported more financial harm from others drinking than men, and this was particularly the case in low and middle income countries compared to high income countries. So 3% of women in high income countries reported financial harm from others drinking, whereas 11% of women in low and middle income countries did so. And 6% of women across the world have reported that they've been their lives have been financially affected because of someone else's drinking. Children also, when we ask families, ask caregivers about harms to children, significant numbers of significant numbers of families report that their children in their families have been affected by others drinking. So 4 to 14% of families reported that children had been either affected physically, verbally, or been left in an unsafe or unsupervised situation or witnessed serious violence in the home. So we're getting, large numbers of problems being reported due to other people's drinking across the world. And now I'm going to jump back to our national survey again and just talk a little bit more about the harms to children. And here we can see this is work from Cass's PhD. So perhaps I will just skip over this because I think Cass might be speaking to this at another time. So anyway, we also do know that children experience a range of harms in our national survey recently, and we have really important accounts of both qualitative accounts of the effects on children, as well as the statistics that we have on how many families reported the numbers of these harms. I will talk a little bit more about some of the other data sets that we use. So we also have in our work looked at child protection system data, and for example, looking at almost 10 years of data from 2012 to 2021, we can see that when we look at the association between reporting of parental alcohol use as a risk factor and progression in the system, that the odds are almost twice as high or are twice as high for people who are identified for families where there's parental alcohol use identified. And we've also found that certain socio-demographic groups are at higher risk, lower socioeconomic groups. And we can also see how, when we study the interactions, that both alcohol and family violence predict progression through the system. And we can see need for targeting interventions that address both alcohol and family violence, that includes sort of wraparound services that might be useful to protect children in these settings. We've also done some work looking at geocoding where child protection cases occur and where there are liquor licenses, and particularly finding relationships between where there are um, off-premise or big box or bottle shop licenses and harms to children. And we found significant differences in child maltreatment across local government areas where higher outlet density was linked with higher outlet density of bottle shops was linked with more reports of child protection cases. And we are still doing further analysis on this and about to send this work off to be published. Um, so, I mean, we've done a lot of work over over the last 20 years that's involved surveys and secondary data sets as well as qualitative work that has where we've interviewed family members, and we found, we became sort of more and more conscious of the fact that these harms to women and children were commonly occurring from men's drinking. So we did a study. We undertook three reviews. One looking at harms to women from men's drinking, another looking at harms to children from men's drinking, and a third that looked at the potential policy options for reducing harms to women and children from men's drinking. And this slide here describes the behaviours or actions of men and their drinking. So in their actions in spending on alcohol or potentially being unemployed because of their drinking, not being unavailable for their children, or not prioritising their child's needs. We looked at how men's aggressive and violent behaviours and disrupting behaviours and conflict can be then linked to longer term and relationship and family effects for children, for neglect and maltreatment of children, for impacts on their health and psychological well-being, and also we found that there were social and educational impacts. So again, this is a scoping review undertaken by Cass that also places these harms in context, and found that alongside these specific sort of proximal harms from men's drinking were really important complex and co-occurring factors. So for example, we have economic disadvantage, particularly in low and middle income countries. We saw poverty associated with worsened individual and family consequences, and persistent unemployment, economic instability, low education. These kinds of factors interacted along with homelessness to increase the risk of harms to children from drinking where there was economic disadvantage. We also saw how different cultural and patriarchal and gender norms were hegemonic norms were associated with increased violence in the household. And we can see also that where we found evidence of gendered power dynamics and toxic or masculinity is present, that these patriarchal norms were putting men in positions of power and were associated with high levels of men's alcohol consumption, and then in turn alcohol-related consequences for children and families. And finally, another large contextual factor we saw was that when there was intimate partner violence, children were rarely the subject of the review, but were listed as potentially affected due to these both being exposed to men's violence against women and exposed to potentially their own um, to their own child abuse and neglect by directly being harmed, but in the context of this intimate partner violence and family harm. So we summarised all of this and talk about how there are um, impacts on women and children from alcohol affected men, and we look at we place all of these proximal impacts in the context of different household and community and cultural moderators, and contextual determinants, the social determinants of health, gender equality, economic development, and describe how policies and interventions can be brought into play at different levels. And in a sense, some of this work is really neatly summarised in this article that we wrote for the conversation, and so the QR codes there if anyone would like to sort of read through that article. And I guess we have been thinking, how does our work inform policy? How does it, how can we best drive policy that reduces harm to women and children, but also to men themselves? And we have been thinking through how we can analyze different policies to see how women and children and appear in these policies, how alcohol appears in our policies about women and children, how alcohol appears and is framed in even our global strategies and our national strategies. Is harms to others? Is it used as a driver for action, or is it discussed but then largely ignored? And yeah, so I mean, Cass again will talk more about this when she presents, but she has done some analysis of how we see children represented in a whole range of different national alcohol and health and social strategies in Australia. And I think, we'll note that often children aren't mentioned, or alcohol and children are not mentioned, and others drinking are not mentioned in these strategies, or if they are mentioned, or mentioned briefly, and then there's often little action taken to implement or to change what the contextual factors might be around how we address these harms. So, I mean, thinking through how what we should do. Again, I'm returning to this global policy briefing, and in that we looked at ways in which we might synthesize all of what we know about how men and their drinking can affect women and children, and then we were working through how the actions of men and their drinking might be moderated by a whole range of different factors at household level, at society level, at community. When we think about which community and cultural factors are at play when we look at how women and children might be harmed when men drink and are intoxicated. And so this policy briefing model frames how we might think about developing better alcohol and structural health and social policies to reduce harms to women and children from men's drinking. So That is a bit of a sort of a potpourri of all of the different kinds of studies and work that we've been doing over time on alcohol's harm to others. As you can see, we've been focusing on men's drinking more recently and its impacts on women and children. But thank you for listening to that slightly shambolic discussion of everything that we've been doing. And yeah, I look forward to discussing this work with you. Thank you.
Anne-Marie, thank you. Uh, there's so much information, amazing, that we all need. And it's so big, isn't it?
It is huge, and I think I kind of lost myself in my own data there for occasionally. But I do sometimes think, how do we draw all this together? How do we, what does need to be done to to improve the lives of those people who been affected by other people's drinking. And often it is women and children, but men too. Men are often, in many countries, men are more affected by other men's drinking. It does always seem to be particularly men's drinking that's more problematic than women's. Not that women's drinking can't be problematic, but yeah, how do we best, yeah, reduce the harm, I guess.
Mm, mm. I'm just wondering, do you mind if I throw it open to everyone here just to see if anyone's got a question or perhaps wants to make a comment? Because I mean, some of it would not be unfamiliar to
Mm.
those who are working. Pauline's just said, excellent presentation, wonderful data at the family drug support in New Zealand. We see the impact on family. Yeah. Did you want to say something, Pauline? Feel free.
No, it was a great presentation. The data was excellent. It just absolutely matches the research that we've done through New Zealand and omnibus surveys. It also matches Rose Crossan's research through Otago University, which you'll probably be aware of, which shows that alcohol has the highest harms to self and others, higher than methamphetamine and other drugs. I'm sure you'll probably be aware of Rose Crossan's excellent research. And so it's really good to have this information to back up everything that we are seeing. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks, Pauline.
Yeah. What anyone want to ask a question? Or thanks, Pauline.
I've got a bit of a question. Just such a really interesting presentation, Emery. There's so much in that, and I feel like each of those slides we could have spent an hour on diving into. Such interesting work you guys are doing. I think that just is so wild how huge that policy gap is. We kind of talk about men's mental health and we talk about kind of DV, and it seems quite separate, but alcohol seems to be a thing that is a real strong common factor in the middle of it all. I guess it's not really a question to start with, but just how do we address that? And I think the other interesting point that stood out to me was the density of the bottle shops, that figure that you showed, and that how it so directly links to was it the child protection services and how far people go through that system?
Yes, yeah. I think that was substantiated cases. The relationship between, I don't think it was, But
yeah.
I mean, and socioeconomic factors also come in to play there as well. I mean, there is significant social bias, I think, in who gets studied and sort of monitored in terms of when you look at in the child protection system, especially. Yeah. Probably the family violence sector as well. Yeah.
I think it almost, in my mind, the connection got made of just what we're up against as far as the power of the alcohol industry as well, and kind of silencing a lot of this, or being, just the density of bottle shops and knowing that this is something that is it's just everywhere, and it's so hard to know how to even start tackling it.
Yeah, I mean, we really need to reduce that. Sorry, not reduce. We really need to release that those findings. We're about to sort of submit it because I think there's been some good work done on family violence in Victoria and the relationship between bottle shops and family violence, but not so much on on bottle shops and child abuse and neglect. So there are really important ways in which some of this research can drive policy change. I'm not sure. Was it Robert and then Helen? Or Helen and then Robert? I'm not sure. Sorry.
Rob, your microphone's off.
Thanks, Anne-Marie. Great presentation as well. Be interesting to see just with that concentration of bottle shops and overlay with gambling venues as well, and that correlation. I know your focus is on alcohol, but we see that it's those most vulnerable communities that tend to be most targeted in a predatory way by alcohol companies and gambling as well, especially in Victoria. I know New South Wales has big issues with that too. But something that we've been looking into too is the impact of the fact that you can order alcohol and clearly online, and a lot of people who have died. So we have Founding Drug and Gambling help a bereavement group, and that's shifted a lot of people in terms of their focus on channeling their grief into advocacy. And one mother in particular very strongly around her son who was clearly being delivered alcohol when he was completely incapacitated and then subsequently died. And that's something which doesn't get necessarily tagged on a geographic map, but that is a huge factor as well.
No. Yeah, and it actually, it would be great if we had better sales data on where those delivery points were. But at the moment, I think a lot of the online sales are just sort of allocated to these generic warehouses, which have no actual relationship to where the
Point.
is unfortunately.
Yeah, and just with our helpline, we've noticed, especially since COVID, originally it was ice that was the most commonly drug that was called about, but alcohol, because people were in close proximity with each other and the stress that came with that, or the awareness of the level of drinking that was occurring that people weren't aware of when they were at work, is the main thing that people ring about in our service. So alcohol is a huge issue, both in partner relationships, but also in terms of parents and young children, younger adolescents as well.
And I know just in services in general, alcohol and drug services, it's usually, unless it's a targeted service for a particular drug, it's usually alcohol that is the standout drug that people are ringing about, whether it's about themselves or about someone else. Helen, should we jump over to you? Thank you. You've been waiting very patiently.
No, that's fine. Thank you very much, Anne-Marie. Fantastic presentation, and certainly all your data is reflected in the anecdotal data we have from our thousands of members who are at the other end. You talked about what do we do with these families? Well, send them to us. But I just wanted to know, how did you recruit your families to participate in your qualitative and other surveys?
So we undertook a random telephone survey that was in 2021. It was in the midst of COVID, so it was a little bit. We tried to hold off, but then COVID kept coming, so we thought, oh no, we need to undertake the random telephone digit survey. But in addition to that, we had a panel survey. So there were two parts to this representative national survey with a poor response rate. It's very hard to get people to respond. And then from that random telephone survey and the panel survey, we then we asked people as part of that survey whether they would be willing to be contacted for a follow-up qualitative interview. So we've got a subsample of the quantitative group who agreed participate in the qualitative study. And that's in a sense, it's actually hard to get people from the general population who may have had an alcohol related problem with a family member. Yeah, it was nice to get enough people that way.
I think one of the first connections I had with this group was through Claire, who was doing some research, and one of her comments was, it's hard to find people to recruit for that surge. Please talk to us. We've got thousands of members. We have a captive audience of people who we know have been affected by the effects of alcohol in their families and drugs, but predominantly alcohol.
Yeah.
So, if ever you'd like us to be involved in some of your research, reach out. Happy to chat.
Yeah, I think that we should. I mean, Cass is probably in our team is our lead qualitative researcher now. So we should keep in make contact to think about how we can do that. And I mean, the other thing I wonder about is do you have annual reports, or are there online chat groups or blogs, or is there also that kind of information that people might be willing to share?
We have membership surveys data. We just finished a membership survey at the end of last year, so we have that information. Because of anonymity, we have to be really careful about what information is collected at a public level. But we'd be just happy to have a chat and see if there's some way we can help you, because we're not in a position to do the research. We certainly don't have a position on policy and have any impact in terms of government. But we have a captured audience that we would love to be able to use to benefit some of the research that you guys are doing. I think you guys have got the research angle. We may have your raw data for you, so we'd just be happy to have a chat if it was helpful.
Yeah, it would be great to get some advice from all of those people who have such important lived experience of what has happened in their lives, and it would be great to think into the future. So also, what would they like to see change? What would they like to have? What policies might change? What context? What services are needed? How can we improve the situation for these people who've been affected by others drinking, for family members, etc.? And how can we sort of direct those stories and that information into changing policy or improving services? So maybe if we can if people are willing to give their stories over to making it a difference, it would you don't want to use or abuse people's stories, but at the same time, if they would like to share them and they can help assist in making a difference sometimes it's people's stories that can make more of a difference than than the statistics that go on. If half the population is affected, and still, it doesn't. If you're not aware of how they're affected, it sort of just becomes a number that just you pass by.
Yeah, I know, Pauline, you want to say something?
I just wondered if one of the ways is around when we look at the New Zealand guidelines on alcohol use and the Australian guidelines, and you compare those with the Canadian guidelines, and you look at the carcinogenic aspects of all alcohol use for cancer. I think that is probably going down the health aspects is probably a really strong way to get people to think about the alcohol use, because that's what I found, in work that actually does touch. And the sooner the guidelines in Australia and New Zealand are changed and the Canadian guidelines are looked at, the better. I think that's probably something that could help.
Yeah, I was just recently at the Global Alcohol Policy Conference, and there was talk of how best can we see action across a whole range of different policies. And I think, cancer labeling as well. Cancer, the alcohol, big alcohol is very keen to make sure that there isn't any information about alcohol and cancer on labeling, on labels. So, that might be one way as well. Changing the guide. I mean, I'm not sure how many people read the guidelines, but if they can be kind of twigged as to the link between alcohol and cancer, and people may well, reflect on their drinking more. It might change. That can change behaviour. And I think, also, I mean, there's the tax and price and minimum unit price and some of those kinds of big policy mechanisms, levers, do change people's behaviour. I think there's some significant evidence that those kinds of policy models work best. So if we can sort of drive action on price and taxation and advertising as well, there's still, we have some restrictions, but it's all self-regulated advertising, and there's still plenty of sport and alcohol-related connections, etc., etc. So there's a range of different ways in which there might be action that people are generally supportive of. Nobody wants to see alcohol-related advertising like across the footy or let alone gambling related advertising, etc. So I think there's plenty of appetite for change on some of these big policy items, but there is a strong influence from the industry as well that doesn't want those kinds of things to change because they know that they will impact their profitability.
Yeah, but is it? Yeah, and there's other issues as well, isn't it? But it's just this idea about linking, because I'm just thinking about a lot of us do work with people who are affected by someone else's alcohol use and other drug use as well. And so a lot of what you were saying, it's good to hear it on a big statistical level. But also I think the thing that I, just naming that, predominantly we're concerned about men's drinking and then the harms that are generated through men's drinking, and yet who gets sanctioned is like women. And I know that from personal experience with working with people, that I could have someone going into the court with a drink driver offence, and if it was a woman, she would be more heavily sanctioned than a man. So
yeah, I mean, even the alcohol industry is to have. I mean, we've got labelling on FASD, but we don't have labelling that affects men's drinking, and there's far more harms that are occurring due to men's drinking than there are due to women's drinking.
It's very interesting, isn't it? And I really loved you. I think that's one of the things that really hit home for me was just how plainly your data is showing that. And we know that, but it's just there, which is fabulous. But I think if you were looking for qualitative participants, I know, Helen, it's great that you're saying, look here at us. But I think many of us might have people who could, we could help you in that area probably, for sure. I think, And
I think it's, especially, I mean, people with lived experience too. I think it's important. So I think the research sector is getting better at working with people who have lived experience, but we haven't always been. I mean, and I guess, I think people have tried sensitively to do qualitative analyses of people who have a range of different experiences, but it's a different thing again from working with people who have lived experience. So I think that's another area where I think we can do better, especially if we're trying to influence policy.
Yeah. And it is that link between, we've got research, we've got the policy, and we've got the practice. And I think here if we can make that link firm, it could really be exciting, really, about what the possibilities could be.
Well, I also sort of think, because I think Affinet is more, it does take maybe just correct me if I'm assuming wrongly, but it takes a more of a counselling based supportive um, almost like a treatment based approach to family, and I guess, or a service based. How do you support people within their individual and family and relationships, more so than a sort of a societal perspective? I mean, yeah, again, correct me if I'm wrong, and I think that is really important. Like we absolutely need the treatment and support sector for those people who are drinking and have concerns about their own drinking, but also about those who have concerns about others drinking. So I feel like this work could also support the need for services for more people if that were required, because it does take a more a cross-sectional sort of population-based approach rather than an individual level. This is, treatment approach. But I think we can work together to support each other's action, policy.
And Rob, do you want to say something about Affinet?
Yeah, just to say, obviously, Julie and I are on the board of trustees of Affinet, and I think what's really special about that is that it's very much seeking to look at every aspect around the impact on families, and research is critical. So while there's obviously that really strong foundation around a direct treatment approach, there are many different ones that are advocated and research going into, but also the research that you've done provides a context. And I think for me, always with research, we can research and research and research, and it's really important. But at what point is there the leverage where the system itself is challenged or changed that then has the meaningful impact on families' lives, or the impact that substances, in this case alcohol, is having on the family system, and how to engage men in particular, because one of the challenges is men, even in help seeking, tend to be in the back end, responding to or getting information in a different way from, essentially, without being typecast in gender-based, but generally it's the women and the mothers who are the ones who are very strongly the advocates, the ones finding the information, the ones going to these groups or attending these supports or participating in the research, as lived experience participants, and how to really engage men across culture as well. Because I was really interested to see your research around the Thai figures, and what's happening in the Thai context and in Asia, different from other contexts as well. So Affinet is very much growing, and in terms of really wanting to integrate all aspects of research, treatment, lived experience and everything else. And that's what's really exciting. And to sort of have this Oceania focus is feeding into the bigger picture. And so I trust you've put in an abstract for the upcoming online conference, Anne-Marie. A shout out for that as well.
When is it too? It's probably too late. I think
it's never too late to make special exemptions for Latrobe. I'm a Latrobe alumni as well, so I'm sure. But no, that closes shortly. But you have time. It closes in May.
End of May.
Okay. What date is it? Because I have a funny feeling.
14th and 15th of September, the conference.
Okay.
But I think 14th and 15th, is that right?
The 15th and 16th.
But it's the Friday of that week is the one that's more pitched at Oceania time zones. So because it's international, we don't want to get up at 3 a.m. to watch someone's presentation. So they've staggered it but we still get the rough end of the stick, and New Zealand gets the worst end of the stick. So, so Pauline has to get up very early or very late.
Yeah. So definitely, Anne-Marie, and I think Claire and Paige and we had a meeting with Richard not long ago, well, a while ago now, 6 months ago, and Richard Velleman, who's one of the founders.
Yes, author,
yeah. And that's exactly what he was starting to talk about, was policy, and I was going, so this is so big. But with your data, it becomes just so possible. It's fantastic, really. So yes, we need an abstract. Rob's absolutely right. And I will send you a link to
Thank you.
so that you've got the link.
Yeah.
And
For some reason I thought I had a clash, but I don't know that I do. So I better
it's
I better
it's
get
15th and
myself busy.
16th, and I know Robert's been on Thursday, Friday in the past, but it's Tuesday, Wednesday this year. And so
Excellent.
Wednesday is the Oceania time zone. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, perfect. So, and because you've had those 3 studies really that you were presenting on today, and all of them would be, any one of them would be interesting. So, Cass, you know, you could be, we'd love to hear from you as well. Be great. And it's an international audience, you know. So, and it's such great research, Anne-Marie. It needs to be.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, I cut you off. Were you going to say something else?
No, I don't think so.
No. Does anyone else want to say, or yes, Ros, go ahead. Your microphone is, yeah.
Thanks, Julie. It's been fascinating. I just wanted to say, as well as trying to determine top down, if you like, policies from government, but also looking from the bottom up and helping those family members get into recovery for themselves is a huge impact on society. To encourage the family members that you do come across to actually come into something like Al-Anon, and there are other services as well, for their own recovery, to help themselves get away, not get away physically from the alcoholic or drinking person, but to help them to get their own self back and their own life back, and then be able to engage with the alcoholic, but in a way that is helpful for them, that they're not engaged, they're not codependent and enabling and lost and all of that. So they, in these programs, they can learn to find themselves and recover, and then be much more functional people in society and within their families, and help their children, because there's programs for children as well to learn this, and detach from the alcoholic with love. And then the alcoholic then learns that they have to find support for themselves, that they're not being held up. They have to be left alone. And then it leads to a lot of the drinking people, learning to find their own solutions and looking out for somewhere to go to help for themselves. And that, along with government policies, so coming at it from both ends, I think is imperative.
Yeah, I agree.
Encourage recoveries.
One thing I've always been a bit concerned about is, how do you highlight that this is a problem without, stigmatizing the person drinking, and they need, they need support for their own well-being, and their own, as well as the family. So it's very, I hope that we can somehow continue to highlight this as a problem without alienating men in particular, I think, or people drinking in particular. Yeah, we need to do it, to do both. Yeah.
Yeah, I've definitely my PhD obviously focusing on methamphetamine use, but a lot of it applies no matter what the substance is. But it's sort of 50-50 from the perspective of the person using methamphetamine and then family members. So definitely I put myself in a very tricky spot trying to walk the line between not stigmatizing either group and sort of doing justice to their perspective. So yeah, I definitely think it is tricky. And a lot of research obviously are trying to show one side of the story or the other. And, a lot of people from either side are stigmatizing their family member, whether it's someone who's using the substances, or they're like, well, my parent did this to me when I was growing up and that's why I'm using, and that kind of thing. Yeah, I mean, I don't really have a solution for it, but I definitely think it's something that in this space needs to be considered. And I think it is perhaps becoming considered more so more recently, which is good to see. But yeah, I think definitely some more work to be done. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I do think the product itself has, it is more difficult where when the other drug, aside from alcohol, is illicit. There's a lot more stigma around illicit consumption than there is around alcohol consumption. So, but in a sense, that means at least you can use a range of different strategies to price and you can use different policies that you can't use because you don't want to criminalize the use, which happens with other drugs that doesn't happen with alcohol. So at least there's not that stigma.
Yeah. I guess it's also though, as we were talking before about your presentation more in general, there's definitely more of an acceptance of people drinking. It's like, oh, well, that's just, it's normal to have a wine after dinner or to go to the pub with your friends on a weekend or something. But I think that can also mask if there is, perhaps that's happening at more of a risky level. So yeah, definitely specific things that need to be considered, whether you're talking about alcohol or illicit drugs. But yeah, I guess more in terms of some of the harms that you see in family relationships and that kind of thing. Like there's a lot of overlap there.
Yeah.
I think we've got a really good example in Australia of public policy that worked exceptionally well, but it was a long-term strategy, and that was the smoking campaign that the tobacco campaign, and it worked on multiple levels. It was public education, there was policy changes, we had the data, and then we started moving through various changes for public spaces and things like that. And it was met with a lot of resistance in the beginning, but the outcome of that, I think I saw some data recently, and no longer do you see tobacco harms. Now you see alcohol harms as the highest. And we didn't see that for years. Like, we were not seeing that for decades. It was always tobacco and then alcohol and then cannabis until we have methamphetamines, of course, causing the harm. So I think we've got a way that we know will work. And then I also think about, Rob, I don't know, three sides of the coin, that work that gets done there about very carefully telling people's stories in a way, but I'm not sure if it's only focused on the gambling. And Claire, I can see your hand and I'm coming to you.
Yeah, that's right. It touches on gambling, but the intersection with alcohol, drug use, mental health, the justice system, family violence, because these things intersect with everything. It's, we don't live in bubbles. And I think that's the issue, the ripple effect across domains of health and wellbeing.
Yeah, and I was thinking about very powerful ways of telling a story is the way that work has been done there too. Yeah. Claire, sorry, you're right if I jump Anne-Marie over to Claire as well.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Claire, you've got a question.
Thank you. It's so interesting, and I think when we're looking at kind of making a difference moving forward, I think things like your research really shows just what you've told us about today, which I'm sure isn't all of it, but it shows how complicated it is. And I think whatever approach comes in, I think your example there about the aligning towards the smoking policy and that kind of shift that happened. But I feel it is multi-pronged, isn't it? There's going to be that kind of like, what can we do for the individual themselves, and how can we bring it away from just drink responsibly to how can we reduce harm across, I don't know, like families, communities, and the systems that we're in. And I think the thing that smoking policy perhaps didn't do that I think we've got the advantage with around alcohol and other drugs is that to offer support, it doesn't have to be reliant on the person changing themselves. I think for smoking, that worked less well, and their policy sort of didn't fully do that in a way that I think alcohol probably needs to. So I think that non-stigmatizing and taking the judgment out for it, because not everybody's going to stop drinking. However, we can still reduce the harm and make life really different for people. But it is going to be about doing, something around the individual responsibility, something around kind of the family and that community around it and the systems, and then the reduction of harm, and then thinking about there is stuff that can be done around those high risk environments, or cheap alcohol or cheap substances, or where we have got like lots of bottle shops and that high density, and the impact, and sharing like the research around what that looks like. Because we also, I think something else you mentioned there, Julie, was around the education bit, because I think I'm from the UK originally, out in New Zealand now, and the culture is really different in the sense of how normal is it to seek help. And in some countries, some environments, it's not normalized, so if we can get in earlier, so it's not just crisis only support, and certainly in New Zealand, sadly, it feels like it's very much that way at times. Whereas if it's people can raise it earlier and the education side of it comes in earlier, that it's that awareness bit. I think it is those multi-pronged, which is why it's such a complex thing. I think, the policy is important, the support is important. There's so many different elements that come into it. But it's like, how do we make this into bite-sized chunks to make an actual difference step by step? Because actually it all needs to be done and to come together, and, supporting each other like this, so we can share that information to get the word out. Because I don't think any country is unique. I think we're all experiencing the same thing. And the same harms, or very similar harms, obviously nothing's the same, but yeah, that was all. But it's amazing to be a part of this, and try to think about how we can coordinate these things.
Yeah, thanks.
Really nice summary.
Yeah. I might just zip around and just ask people specifically if they wanted to say anything. Heidi, did you want to say anything? No, listening. Getting closer, going to submit for the AFINET conference.
I think I did. I hope it came through.
Oh, you have already submitted?
Well, I thought so.
Oh, I will double check and come back to you later.
Yeah, maybe. No, you know what? I'm going to double check now. I definitely wrote the abstract.
Yeah, I'm about to write to you, so I'm not sure that it has gone through.
Oh, that's weird. I wonder if I've done something wrong on the form.
Just let me know.
Yeah.
I'll follow you up, Heidi. It's okay.
Yeah, all right. Sounds good.
Yeah. Thank you. What about you, Heather? Sitting there quietly.
Yeah, I am sitting here quietly. Thank you so much, Anne-Marie. So I work with an adolescent drug and alcohol program, and at the moment I'm in the middle of running another parent group. So all of the parents attending are impacted by their young persons' drug and alcohol use, and it's always so powerful, and the sense in the group, and the words of, we run a tuning into teens group, so it's a standard parenting group that's based on emotion coaching and connection, but it's just that everybody who attends can talk a little more freely, because they're parents who've got young people using a lot of drugs and or alcohol and having contact with the law. But the sense of shame and the isolation and nicely in contrast to what we're saying now, we've got 8 parents in the group, but 4 dads who are who, if I think of last week's group, comments like, your friends, if you have any left, don't understand what's going on. You can't talk to people, and the sense of shame, i.e., how does this reflect on me as a parent, that my young person is using drugs. So I'm thinking about your conference and about this being a different perspective, Rob. But yeah, very, very important and unspoken perspective that it's nice to, I'm loving it. Thank you.
It's great, Heather. You do great work. We'd love to hear you present on it again from a slightly different perspective at the AFINET conference.
I'll see if I can, encourage myself to do so.
It's a thing to put in an abstract, but the talking time isn't all that long. So, yeah. Righty. Anna from FDS. Sorry, that's why Anna, I can see another Anna from Insight, so I'll do both of you. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm recovering from a flu, so I have a very bad voice and a very nasty cough at the moment. So I shouldn't be able to talk much, but I really enjoyed the session, especially thinking about the gender role and something that we see on our data as well at FDS, and something that I think it's a very complex topic, and there's so many layers to that, and how to address men's mental health as well, because I think that's the bottom line of that. Men take a long time to seek help. Men rely a lot of drinking, so it's how to break those patterns as well, and what we can alternatively offer to the men to cope in a better way. And yeah, just think about a lot of things. But thank you so much about the presentation. It's very interesting topic.
Thanks, Anna. And Anna from Insight.
Well, I want to say thank you so much, Anne-Marie, for all that information you've presented. It's put me in mind of I'm currently in the middle of reviewing some resources for Breakthrough for Families here in Queensland. The service providers have given a lot of feedback into how the resources that we originally developed some years ago need a bit of updating, and particularly around things like some of this data around alcohol and its impact on some of the severer harms, particularly around intimate partner violence, and some of those things. I'm now kind of thinking about how I can maybe incorporate some of this into that review in the way that the service providers have requested. So thank you again for that.
Yeah, that's
happy to help if you want to, send through a draft or something. I'm sure others in the group too might have some, important statistics that they think would be great to incorporate in that kind of general updates for practitioners. Yeah.
It's less about presenting statistics, because these are for family and family education sessions, and the less in terms of statistics, the better, I think, in many ways. But how we might use that data to kind of strengthen some of the educational resources that strengthen some of the kind of messaging for families. But thank you for the offer, and I may take you up on that.
There's some great other pieces too. I don't know if you know of the work of Ingrid Wilson, who sort of has the cycle, has done some really sadly descriptive and beautiful work, but it's quite quite hard to read.
It's graphic.
Whose work is that, Anne-Marie?
Ingrid Wilson.
Ingrid Wilson.
I can pop it in the chat if you like.
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah. Cassandra, did you want to say anything here too? I know there were references to your research in there. Congratulations again. But do you want to say anything? You've got a bit of distance from your PhD now.
A little bit. I mean, I only submitted in February and I already got comments back, so
Yeah, which is
very
fabulous. At
fast.
least that's going fast.
Yeah. No, I don't have anything else to say. It's always interesting to see Emery bring all the different aspects of our work together because it's obviously quite a big team and we all have our own little niches, and it's always interesting to look at it as a whole rather than when you get stuck on your one topic.
Yeah, that's so true too, isn't it? We just go into this space that we're working in, and this is our world, and it's so good to listen to Anne-Marie and to hear the enormity. That's what struck me, is the bigness of it all. And Anne-Marie, I can't imagine how you cope with all of it, really. Yeah. Heidi's got a hand up. Yes.
I actually was just wondering, Anne-Marie, if you did have a list somewhere of your publications or something, because I mean, I've got this huge list I've written down as you've gone through your PowerPoint. And selfishly it is because I've just finished a qual paper on women's experiences of caring for someone. And so I was interested in more of the statistics and interestingly found it quite hard to find Australian stats. So yes, I mean I do have a few written down that you talked about, but if there are more, I would love to see them.
There's one in particular that just jumps to mind by Jade Rintala, Rintala. She's just published, she's the first author of a paper that looks at, in the last National Alcohol's Harm to Others survey, how many people reported needing formal and informal care because of someone else's drinking, or approaching people for formal and informal care. So that would be one that would be contemporary. I can send you my CV if you want. It's got quite a few bits and pieces in it. And some of those, I don't know whether if the slides are sent around, the QR code for the most recent National Australian Harm to Others report, that has a list of publications at the back that includes that one by Jade as well as others.
Sure.
And I mean, I think we're working on it. I mean, I think Cass is working on another paper that looks at carers' experience or people's experiences with service providers and formal and informal care that that's in the pipeline. Another qualitative paper that come out there. I mean, I really do enjoy the qualitative insights that we get from that kind of research. I mean, I'm more of a quantitative researcher, but I think I'm also more attracted to what we can learn from qualitative studies as well.
Yeah.
Where there was, and again, that policy review, another QR code. Ingrid Wilson led that study too, that looked at, it was a review of qualitative studies of harms to women from men's drinking. So that was purely a qualitative review. That's really quite powerful. I haven't found that other one yet. I'm trying to find the right reference for Ingrid's paper. Yeah.
Cass has just put it up for us.
Oh,
we've got it.
Cass.
Just jumped in. Yeah. Okay.
Well done, Cass.
Yeah.
That's the one with the bottle top?
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, thank you.
And Anne-Marie, if you want to send me through your slides, I can just circulate that via email to everyone so they don't have to navigate through the Google Drive.
Sure. Okay. Sounds good. Okay. Happy to. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I might start wrapping us up because we've been here for an hour and a half nearly. And look, Anne-Marie, thank you so much. And I can hear that we're going to be, every time someone asks us a question, we're going to say, you might need to talk to Anne-Marie. She'll have that data. So
Yes, might be able to find it more quickly.
So I was wondering did anyone else have any other announcements that they wanted to make? give you the opportunity. We've talked about the AFINet conference that's coming up, giving you the link to the forms. Heidi, I'll check that out for you. No one else has got an announcement, Lou? Okay.